You go to the garden center, you pick up what looks like a perfectly good fruit tree, you bring it home, you repot it, you water it, and then nothing happens. A year goes by, maybe 2. The tree looks fine, it's alive, it's just not doing what a fruit tree is supposed to do. If that's happened to you, this video is going to explain exactly why, and show you 13 trees that actually perform in pots and small spaces without the guessing game. Number 13 is the one almost nobody considers, and it might be the fastest producer on this entire list. Most people who try container fruit growing aren't doing anything dramatically wrong. They're watering, they're fertilizing, they're giving the tree sunlight. The problem is almost always something that happened before the tree even came home. A decision made at the nursery that quietly sets the whole thing up to underperform. We're going to get to exactly what that is. But first, if you have a space that gets 6 or more hours of direct sun, whether that's a balcony, a porch, a patio, or a south-facing window, you have enough to make at least 3 or 4 of these trees genuinely productive. You don't need a yard, you just need to start with the right tree. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which trees produce the fastest, which ones handle neglect best, and which variety fits your specific space and climate. No guessing, no wasted money on trees that won't perform. Every pick on this list has been verified by growers working with limited space, from studio apartment balconies to small backyard patios. And if you want to skip the research every time you add a new plant to your space, subscribing to ExoticaPlants means that work is already done for you. Container fruit growing isn't a workaround, it's a legitimate method with a long history. Ancient growers in the Middle East and Asia cultivated fruit trees in clay pots long before modern horticulture had a name for it. Today, advances in dwarf rootstock technology and container soil science have made it more reliable and more productive than ever. Every tree on this list was selected based on 4 specific criteria: root adaptability to confined spaces, availability in dwarf or compact form, verified fruiting performance in containers, and accessibility for growers at every experience level. These aren't theoretical picks, they're being grown right now by real people in real small spaces across the country. Let's start with the one that almost every beginner gets right on the very first try. The Meyer lemon is where most container fruit journeys begin. And for good reason. It's a natural hybrid between a lemon and a mandarin orange, which gives it a slightly sweeter flavor and a thinner skin than a standard lemon. What makes it exceptional for containers is its compact growth habit, its tolerance for indoor conditions, and the fact that it's self-fertile, meaning one tree is all you need to get fruit. A grafted Meyer lemon can begin producing within 1 to 2 years. It blooms multiple times per year in warm conditions, filling a room with fragrance before the fruit even sets. The single most common mistake growers make is overwatering. Meyer lemons sitting in soggy soil develop root rot faster than almost any other container citrus. Water deeply, then let the top 2 inches dry out completely before watering again. 2. Dwarf Peach genetic dwarf peaches are a different category from standard peaches grown on dwarfing rootstock. Varieties like Bonanza and Honey Babe were bred specifically to stay compact, typically under 5 feet, without sacrificing fruit quality. They bloom early in the season with striking pink blossoms, making them as ornamental as they are productive. A young nursery tree in a 15-gallon container will often produce fruit in its second year. The critical factor most growers overlook is the chilling requirement. Peaches need a certain number of hours below 45 degrees Fahrenheit each winter to break dormancy properly and set fruit. If you're in a warm climate, look specifically for a low-chill variety before purchasing. Skipping dormancy care entirely is the most common reason container peach growers get beautiful foliage and no fruit at the end of the season. 3. Blueberry. Technically a shrub, the blueberry earns its place on this list because it performs with the consistency and productivity of a small fruit tree in the right container. Setup. It's one of the more rewarding plants you can grow in a pot, but it has one non-negotiable requirement that most beginners miss entirely. Blueberries demand acidic soil with a pH between 4.5 and 5.5. Plant them in standard potting mix and they'll struggle, yellow, and stall, sometimes for an entire season before the grower figures out what went wrong. Amend with peat moss, use an acidifying fertilizer, and monitor pH regularly. Planting two different varieties also noticeably increases yield through cross-pollination. Top Hat, Sunshine Blue, and Peach Sorbet are all compact varieties that thrive in containers and produce reliable harvests once their soil needs are properly met. Now here's where the list starts to shift. The next few trees are ones people grow for decades in the same pot, and they ask for almost nothing once they're established. 4. Fig. The fig is one of the oldest cultivated fruit trees on Earth, and it may be the most forgiving tree you can grow in a container. Ficus carica has been growing in pots in Mediterranean courtyards for thousands of years. It practically evolved for confined spaces. What makes it unique is that it actually fruits better when slightly root-bound. Unlike most trees that need regular repotting to stay productive, the fig prefers a bit of confinement. It's self-fertile, drought-tolerant once established, and produces 2 crops per year in warm climates. Brown turkey and petite negra are reliable container choices. The main mistake to avoid is repotting too frequently out of good intentions. If the tree is producing well, leave it alone. Figs reward patience and minimal interference more than almost any other tree on this list. 5. Dwarf Avocado. Most avocado trees grow 30 feet tall and take 7 or more years to produce fruit from seed, which is exactly why the Wurtz avocado, also sold as Little Cado, stands apart. It's the only true dwarf avocado variety reliably available for container growing, and it tops out at 8 to 10 feet even in the ground, making it very manageable in a large pot. A grafted Wurtz can begin fruiting in 1 to 2 years. It can even produce fruit indoors when given a sufficiently bright, sunny location, which surprises most people the first time they hear it. The mistake most growers make is using a container that's too large too soon. Avocados in oversized pots are surrounded by more soil than their roots can process, which stays wet too long and leads directly to root rot. Start in a 15-gallon container and size up gradually as the tree establishes. 6. Kumquat. The kumquat doesn't come up in most container fruit conversations, and that's a genuine oversight. It's one of the cold-hardiest citrus trees available. It can handle brief dips to around 18 degrees Fahrenheit, which puts it within reach for growers in zones where most citrus won't survive a winter outdoors. The fruit is eaten whole, skin and all, which catches most people off guard the first time. The skin is sweet, the flesh is tart, the opposite of what you'd expect from any other citrus fruit. In a container, it stays naturally compact, holds its fruit on the branch for weeks after ripening, and blooms with small white flowers that are noticeably fragrant. It's not the most glamorous pick, but it's a consistent and reliable one. For growers in cooler climates who want citrus without the annual indoor-outdoor production, this is the one to start with. That's the citrus section covered. But this is where things get genuinely interesting, because the next tree surprises almost everyone who tries it. 7. Dwarf Banana. Most growers assume bananas require a tropical plantation to thrive, but dwarf varieties like Dwarf Cavendish and Super Dwarf Cavendish have proven that assumption wrong repeatedly. Super Dwarf Cavendish stays between 4 and 5 feet tall, fits comfortably in a large container, and under the right conditions will produce a hand of fruit within 9 to 15 months. It needs warmth, consistent moisture, and humidity, conditions that are very achievable on a sunny patio or indoors near a bright window. The visual impact alone makes it worth growing. There are few container plants that create the same dramatic, lush atmosphere. The most common mistake is underestimating its water needs. Bananas in containers dry out quickly and stall immediately when they don't receive enough consistent moisture during active growth. 8. Olive tree. The Arbequina olive is about as low maintenance as container fruit trees get. Once it's established, which takes 1 full growing season, it handles dry periods without complaint, tolerates poor soil better than most trees, and doesn't need much attention to stay healthy. It won't fruit in year 1. Most container olives take 3 to 5 years to produce, so if you're looking for a fast harvest, this isn't the right pick. What it offers instead is longevity. A healthy Arbequina in a container can live and produce in the same pot for decades. The fruit is small, flavorful, and best processed before eating. If you want a tree you can mostly leave alone and come back to year after year, one that gets better the longer you have it, the olive is a solid long-term investment in your space. 9. Dwarf Cherry. Sweet cherries have a reputation for being difficult, but the right compact variety in the right container setup changes that picture significantly. Stella and Compact Stella are both self-fertile, meaning you don't need a second tree for pollination, and they perform well in containers with full sun. They need cold winters to fruit. The chilling requirement is real and can't be bypassed, but in temperate climates, they deliver a genuinely impressive harvest. The spring blossom display is spectacular. As a bonus, one practical note that every container cherry grower learns quickly: birds find potted cherries faster than ground-planted ones. A simple netting solution before the fruit fully ripens will save your entire harvest. It's a small step that makes an enormous difference come picking season. Now we're in the final stretch, and this is where the list gets practical for growers who want real production without a lot of fuss. 10. Dwarf Apple. The Dwarf Apple is one of the most satisfying long-term container fruit trees for growers in temperate climates. What most people don't realize is that the variety name matters far less than the rootstock. M27 and M9 rootstocks produce trees that stay under 6 feet even at full maturity, which is exactly what you want in a container. Without checking the rootstock, you could buy a Fuji apple labeled dwarf that still grows large enough to overwhelm a pot within 3 seasons. Self-fertile varieties like Fuji, Gala and Golden Sentinel are ideal if you only have space for one tree. With 2 compatible varieties, cross-pollination noticeably increases your yield. Annual pruning keeps the canopy manageable, encourages fruiting wood, and ensures the tree stays productive for many years in the same container. 11. Pomegranate. The Nana Dwarf Pomegranate is one of the more honest picks on this list in terms of expectations. It's compact, 2 to 3 feet at most, heat-tolerant, and handles drought once it's established. Fruit production typically starts in year 2 or 3, not immediately. But the blooms arrive early in the season. They're genuinely striking in a container, and once the tree settles in, it tends to fruit reliably with minimal intervention. It's not the most prolific producer in terms of raw volume, but it's consistent, it's long-lived, and it performs well in climates where other fruit trees struggle with the heat. For growers in warmer parts of the country, the South, the Southwest, Southern California, it's one of the more practical container choices available. 2 more to go, and both of them are consistent producers that deserve more attention than they typically get. 12. Dwarf Lime. The Persian lime, also known as the Tahitian lime, is among the most practical container citrus trees available. It produces seedless fruit. The tree is nearly thornless compared to most citrus varieties, and in warm climates, it fruits continuously throughout the year rather than in a single seasonal flush. For anyone who cooks regularly, having a productive lime tree within arm's reach is genuinely useful in a way that's hard to overstate. It's compact enough for a 15-gallon container, responds well to light pruning, and pairs naturally alongside a Meyer lemon if you have space for 2 containers. One important note for indoor growers: keep lime trees away from air conditioning vents and cold drafts near windows in winter. Citrus roots are sensitive to cold soil temperatures, and even a tree that looks healthy above the surface will stop producing if its roots are consistently chilled. 13. Dwarf Mulberry. This is the entry that surprises almost everyone, and it earns that reaction. Most people only know mulberry as a massive landscape tree that stains everything within a wide radius. But dwarf and weeping varieties like Icei and Dwarf Everbearing are a completely different situation. They stay compact, grow comfortably in containers, and produce fruit faster than nearly anything else on this list, often within the very first growing season. Icei is self-fertile, low maintenance, and produces sweet elongated berries continuously from late spring through early fall. The flavor is excellent, mild, sweet, and reminiscent of a blackberry without the tartness. The only honest warning: ripe mulberries stain everything they touch. Position your container away from patios, light-colored furniture, or any surface you care about. Outside of that single consideration, the dwarf mulberry is one of the most underused and most rewarding container fruit trees available to home growers today. Here's the honest answer to why so many container fruit trees never produce, and it's simpler than most people expect. When you walk into a Home Depot, a Lowe's, or most general garden centers in the US, the fruit trees on the shelves are labeled by variety: Fuji apple, Alberta peach, Meyer lemon. What those labels almost never tell you is the rootstock, and the rootstock is what actually controls how large the tree grows. Buy the wrong one and you can do everything else right. Perfect soil, perfect watering, perfect sun, and still end up with a tree that lives in your pot for 3 years without producing anything meaningful. This is where most people get it wrong, and it's not their fault because nothing at the point of sale tells them to ask the question. A standard-sized tree placed in a container doesn't stay small, it gets stressed. Its root system, which would normally spread several feet in every direction through open soil, gets compressed and bound. Instead of directing energy toward fruit production, the tree spends its resources trying to survive the confinement. The result is a tree that looks reasonably healthy above the surface, grows slowly, and produces little to nothing, sometimes for years. You're not failing as a grower, you're working with the wrong tool for the situation. True dwarfing is built into the rootstock. A tree grafted onto M9 rootstock, common for apples, stays under 6 feet and channels energy into fruiting rather than excessive vegetative growth. Flying dragon rootstock does the same for citrus. This isn't a new trick or a complicated workaround. It's how commercial orchards have managed tree size for over a century. The container grower just needs to apply the same thinking before purchasing. The practical step is straightforward. Before buying any fruit tree for a pot, ask what rootstock it's grafted on. If the seller doesn't know, or if the tree is being sold at a general hardware store without rootstock information on the tag, treat that as a red flag. A reputable specialty nursery, online or local, will have that information readily available. It's the one question that separates a productive container tree from an expensive disappointment. This doesn't guarantee every tree will perform perfectly. Climate, consistent care, and patience still matter, and results vary. Some trees take longer to establish than expected, and your first attempt may not go exactly as planned. But eliminating the rootstock problem removes the most common and most preventable reason container fruit trees fail. Everything else is manageable. This is the part that silently derails most growers before they ever get a chance to figure out what went wrong. Container fruit growing sits at the intersection of two real shifts happening right now. The first is the move towards smaller living spaces, urban apartments, compact homes, and high-density housing where traditional garden space simply doesn't exist for most people. The second is a growing desire to reconnect with food, to understand where it comes from, to grow at least some of it independently, and to reduce reliance on supply chains that have proven unpredictable in recent years. These two forces meeting is exactly why container fruit growing has moved from a gardening niche into something genuinely mainstream. People aren't doing this because it's trending. They're doing it because it works, because it's practical, and because having even one productive fruit tree, one that you planted, cared for, and harvested from yourself, changes how you think about your space and your food in a way that's hard to describe until you experience it. There's also something deeply rooted in human history happening here. Cultivating fruit trees in portable containers is one of the oldest forms of gardening that exists. What growers are doing on their balconies and patios today is a direct continuation of something people have done across cultures for thousands of years. The scale is smaller, the containers are different. The core impulse to grow food in the space you have is exactly the same. Here's how to move from watching to actually doing this. Start with pot size. For most dwarf fruit trees, 10 to 15 gallons is the right starting point. Move up to 20 or 25 gallons when the tree is actively root-bound. Roots circling the bottom drainage holes are your signal. Don't upsize preemptively. Excess soil that roots can't process stays wet, and persistently wet soil around young roots causes rot faster than almost any other mistake a container grower can make. For soil, skip garden soil entirely. It compacts in containers and cuts off root oxygen within a single season. Use a well-draining mix, roughly 60% quality potting soil, 20% perlite, and 20% compost. Many US growers start with Miracle Grow or a similar pre-mixed potting soil which works fine as a base. Just add perlite to improve drainage, especially if your container doesn't have large drainage holes. Water by feel, not by calendar. Push a finger 2 inches into the soil. Dry at that depth means it's time to water thoroughly until it drains freely from the bottom. Still moist means wait another day. A fixed watering schedule is one of the fastest ways to overwater. Containers in summer heat may need water daily, while the same container indoors in winter may only need it once a week. Fertilize with a balanced, slow-release formula at the start of spring. In late summer, typically late July through August for most of the US, switch to a low-nitrogen fertilizer. That shift signals the tree to direct energy toward fruit development rather than new foliage and branch growth. Over-fertilizing with nitrogen is one of the most reliable ways to produce a lush, healthy-looking tree that fruits poorly. One step specific to the US context: cold-sensitive trees on this list, citrus, banana, avocado, need to come indoors before temperatures drop below 40 degrees Fahrenheit. In most of the country, that means early October at the latest. A south-facing window with supplemental grow lighting if needed will carry these trees through winter without significant stress. It requires planning ahead, but it's entirely manageable and genuinely worth it for the trees that reward you in return. Every fruit tree on this list started as a seed, a cutting, or a small grafted sapling in someone's hands. What turned it into something productive wasn't perfect conditions, wasn't years of expertise, and wasn't a large piece of land. It was one decision: to start with the right tree and give it a real chance. Container fruit growing has a way of rewarding consistency quietly and steadily. A tree that seemed to be doing nothing for months suddenly blooms, then sets fruit, then delivers something you grew yourself in a space most people would have written off as too small to matter. You don't need an orchard, you don't need a yard. You need the right tree, the right pot, and the patience to see it through. That's genuinely all it takes. Before you go, which of these 13 are you actually going to try? Not someday, this season. Pick one based on your space, your climate, and how much attention you can realistically give it. If you're not sure which one fits your setup, drop your location and available space in the comments and I'll point you in the right direction. There are growers watching this from very different climates and very different situations, so your comment helps other people figure it out too. Subscribe to ExoticaPlants if you want to keep going deeper. Next up is a video on the first 90 days of container fruit tree ownership, what specifically goes wrong during that window, and exactly how to avoid it.